President Yoon Suk Yeol on Tuesday night issued a martial law decree after the opposition Democratic Party railroaded a downsized budget bill and filed impeachment motions against the state auditor and the chief prosecutor. The president lifted the order just hours after the parliament passed a motion demanding the lift. And as soon as the law became effective, military forces, including fighter jets, were deployed for surveillance activities over the Nat'l Assembly, where lawmakers and troops clashed. Citizens also rushed to and gathered outside Parliament. And despite the chaos, stock markets in the country are up and running as usual this morning. Tuesday night's declaration also dragged down the Korean won as low as 1,441 per dollar, hitting the lowest since October 2022. For the first time in nearly 5 decades, emergency martial law has been declared in South Korea. In a dramatic showdown between President Yoon Suk Yeol and Parliament, though it took just 6 hours before the order was terminated, our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
President Yoon Suk Yeol declared an end to martial law at around 4:30 a.m. on Wednesday, lifting the measure he announced just hours before amid what he called attempts to overthrow the country's democratic system.
존경하는 국민 여러분, 저는 어제 밤 11시를 기해 국가의 본질적 기능을 마비시키고 자유민주주의 헌정 질서를 붕괴시키려는 반국가 세력에 맞서 결연한 구국의 의지로 비상계엄을 선포하였습니다. 그러나 조금 전 국회의 계엄 해제 요구가 있어 계엄 사무에 투입된 군을 철수시켰습니다.
Following the announcement, the cabinet passed a motion to lift the martial law 6 hours after the president ordered the decree, citing pro-North Korea forces and opponents of the state paralyzing South Korean democracy.
친애하는 국민 여러분, 저는 북한 공산 세력의 위협으로부터 자유 대한민국을 수호하고 우리 국민의 자유와 행복을 약탈하고 있는 파렴치한 종북 반국가 세력들을 일거에 척결하고 자유 헌정 질서를 지키기 위해 비상계엄을 선포합니다.
In an emergency address to the nation, the South Korean leader said the current opposition-led parliament is incapacitating the functions of government, thereby disregarding the livelihoods of citizens. He noted how the opposition Democratic Party of Korea has filed 22 motions to impeach state officials since its inauguration, and continues to intimidate judges and aims to paralyze the executive branch. Also, referring to the opposition's push to pass a reduced budget bill in Parliament, Yoon said this compromises core state functions, including public safety measures.
예산까지도 오로지 정쟁의 수단으로 이용하는 이러한 민주당의 입법 독재는 예산 탄핵까지도 서슴지 않았습니다. 국정은 마비되고 국민들의 한숨은 늘어나고 있습니다. 이는 자유 대한민국의 헌정 질서를 짓밟고 헌법과 법에 의해 세워진 정당한 국가 기관을 교란시키는 것으로서 내란을 획책하는 명백한 반국가 행위입니다.
He deemed martial law a necessary measure to protect the freedom, safety and sustainability of the nation and to ensure a better future for the next generation. This was followed by the military announcing a set of measures, including the suspension of political gatherings that could stir social confusion, the return of the country's striking medical staff within 48 hours, and the control of media and publications under the martial law command. Under Article 77 of the South Korean Constitution, the president may declare martial law in the event of war, an armed conflict, or a national emergency level situation, with the use of military forces to address military needs or to maintain public order and safety. Martial law can also be lifted through a majority vote in the parliament according to Clause 5. It was the first time in 44 years for martial law to be declared in South Korea. The executive measure has been called 16 times, including 12 instances of emergency martial law in South Korea's modern history. While repealing his initial decree, Yoon urged the National Assembly to immediately cease its repeated push for impeachments, legislative tricks, and budgetary obstructions that paralyze the functions of government. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
And we're now learning that senior aides of President Yoon had offered to resign over the martial law declaration. We'll get back to this with more details in our later newscast. Now, following the end of martial law in South Korea, a Joint Chief of Staff has confirmed that no unusual activities has been detected from North Korea. The Joint Chiefs made assurances that South Korea's defense posture remains steady. The military announced that as of 4:22 a.m. Wednesday, troops deployed under emergency martial law orders had returned to their original units. The Unification Ministry also held a high-level meeting this morning to review North Korea's recent activities. The ministry reaffirmed its commitment to a principled approach, prioritizing the stable management of the situation here on the peninsula. Let's recap on what took place on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Within hours of the unexpected order, members of the National Assembly quickly assembled at the Parliament to demand the revocation of the order. Our correspondent Lee Si-hu reports.
The National Assembly in the early hours of Wednesday urgently convened a plenary session and unanimously voted to demand that President Yoon Suk Yeol lift the emergency martial law declared just hours before. At around 1 a.m., 190 of the 300 members of the National Assembly were present, and all voted in favor of the motion demanding the martial law order be lifted under the Constitution, which states that a majority approval from the Parliament can remove martial law.
According to the decisions of the National Assembly, the President must immediately lift the emergency martial law. The martial law order is now void.
Following the meeting at around 2 a.m., National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik sent an official notification of the Parliament's demand to the President and the Defense Ministry. While the National Assembly members from both the rival ruling and opposition blocs reiterated that martial law is indeed void and unconstitutional by procedure.
The National Assembly decision confirms the martial law order void. We, the National Assembly, will regard the constitutional order of the Democratic Republic of South Korea.
We deeply regret this state of affairs. The National Assembly's decision to lift martial law makes the declaration of the law void of practical effect.
They further asked that the members of the military and the police not follow orders that are unconstitutional by procedure, as lawmakers decided to remain at the Parliament for the night.
The National Assembly will do all it can to stabilize the current national chaos. We, together with the people, will certainly safeguard the democratic constitutional order.
Meanwhile, there are growing calls, especially from the opposition, to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol and hold him to account as the rival parties prepare for emergency meetings beginning Wednesday morning. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Military placed on emergency standby and troops trying to breach the main chamber of the National Assembly. This was a night of chaos at the Parliament. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the details.
President Yoon Suk Yeol's sudden, unexpected declaration of emergency martial law, the first such declaration since 1979, surprised civilians, leaving them in disbelief.
I'm a bit stunned right now, and honestly, I'm not sure if this is the right thing. It's so unexpected, and I don't really know what to say.
Actually, I don't know what's happening right now. I just my friend asked me what happened in Korea.
Right after President's declaration, the Defense Ministry shifted to contingency mode. Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, who reportedly proposed the President to issue martial law, ordered a meeting of key military commanders and put the military on alert. Air Force units, including fighter jets, were also deployed for surveillance activities and patrol missions. Soon after, General Park An-soo, the Army Chief of Staff, was named the leader of the Martial Law Command, and at 11 p.m. he issued the first martial law proclamation banning all political activities, placing media and publications under the Martial Law Command's control. As lawmakers attempted to gather at the National Assembly complex, troops attempted to breach the building, with helicopters flying overhead at around 11:50 p.m. Armed soldiers attempting to enter the main chamber faced resistance from parliamentary aides who blocked the entrance with desks and chairs and sprayed fire extinguishers. Some soldiers were even spotted breaking windows to get in. The standoff continued until 190 lawmakers from both ruling and the opposition parties unanimously passed a resolution at 1 a.m. to demand the repeal of martial law. Following the passage, the troops began to withdraw and boarded military buses at a parking lot by the Hangang River near the National Assembly, which departed at around 3:30 a.m. The Defense Ministry also withdrew the martial law command at 4 a.m. and canceled the emergency assembly at the ministry. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, what is this martial law decree and how serious do things have to be for the country's leader to push for such a drastic move? We're joined by attorney An Jung-sung this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Right.
Sir, for our viewers who may not be so familiar with the idea, walk us through what the martial law order means here in South Korea.
Yeah, martial law basically under the South Korean Constitution, President may actually discretion means that he may declare martial law in times of war, armed conflict, and similar national emergencies. So, Constitution, he has right to actually declare the martial law. The question is that whether there's some specific conditions has been met under the Korean Constitution. So, right, and then there has been about 16 times martial law, emergency one. There's two types, but emergency martial law declares 16 times since 1948, and the last one was 1979, October 1979. I guess those who watching this program may be not familiar with what happened in October 1979. There was the assassination of Park Chung-hee. So there was a very emergency situation that there was to declare the martial law. But the question now remains that whether we had some constitutional requirement was met when he declared martial law last night.
Right, then speaking from a legal perspective as we are speaking to you, are there, legal standards or criteria to adhere to for such a call to be issued to begin with?
Yeah, under the Korean Constitution, actually, President have discretion, right? And he may declare the martial law. However, there's two crucial requirements. First, he need to notify the National Assembly without delay. So, Korean Constitution did not specify how many days, like 14 days. Just say without delay means that immediately. So he's supposed to be notified National Assembly. But however, according to the press, and I guess that even the people in the National Assembly so watched the news and they heard the news about the martial law, right? So there was no notification. And the other one is that into the process, and the State Council had to go to the deliberation of the State Council before declare the martial law officially. So we have to question remains whether or not he had complied with the procedural requirement under the Korean Constitution.
Right, lots of questions to be answered. What's happening now is that the leader of Yoon's party, that is Han Dong-un, is calling for the country's defense minister, who apparently proposed the whole idea to the president, to be fired. If that proceeds as planned, what legal steps lie ahead for the defense minister then?
Well, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, right? And theoretically or legally speaking, right, he could end up with the treason charge against him, right? So under the Korean Criminal Code, the maximum penalty is death penalty and minimum is about 5 years. So this is very serious charge against whoever committed or attempt to commit the treason. But however, under the Korean Constitution also, that even the president, if we charge for the treason, that's no protection for the prosecution. So that's a very serious crime. It's not only against the Minister of Defense, and it could be against theoretically against the President Yoon.
Right, that's in line with my next question. There are voices that the president himself should be held responsible. Then what legal action can lawmakers and those who are trying to hold Yoon responsible take at this point? I mean, what legal options are on the table?
I think there's a political answer and the legal answer, right? The political answer, we have two. I think he has two choices: whether he step down immediately, like very soon, or that he just faced with the impeachment process, which will be very painful, right? And then it's time consuming as well. So I think he can make a the political judgment whether he which way he want to take it. Under the from the legal perspective, yes, the National Assembly can proceed with the impeachment process against President Yoon Suk Yeol. Well, they need 1/3 of the vote to, to propose the motion for the impeachment. There's about that's 1/3, right? And there's about 101 vote, and then hit a supermajority. There's about 2/3, about 200 vote to actually get the impeachment done.
So you briefly explained the impeachment process, and I'd like to ask you, is this something that we saw back in 2017? Is this going to be a similar process, if that ever happens, dramatically speaking?
Yes, I guess it could be worse than that before, because that at that time, then President Park Geun-hye didn't even have the martial law issue, right? That's the unconstitutional, activity made by the president. Then president, I think this is very serious criminal charge against not only president and the military and a lot of the issues people involved in this the incident, right?
Alrighty, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Financial and foreign exchange markets also reacted to President Yoon Suk Yeol's martial law order, with fluctuations in Korean stocks and currency. Our Lee Soo-jin explains.
South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol's unexpected declaration of martial law, followed by its swift reversal, has led to volatility in both domestic and global stock markets, as well as the Korean currency. The surprise late-night announcement on Tuesday led the benchmark Kospi to open down 1.97% at 2,450, and the tech-heavy Kosdaq to open 1.91% down at 677. This comes after the Korean exchange, following review of market conditions, decided to open the market on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. as usual. In global markets, U.S.-traded shares of Korean companies initially plunged before regaining ground after martial law was lifted. E-commerce platform Coupang fell as much as 9.8% on the New York Stock Exchange following the martial law declaration, before recovering partially after martial law was lifted. Steelmaker POSCO Holdings saw a drop in the 4% range, and shares of KB Financial Group, LG Display, and KEPCO also fell sharply. But it wasn't just Korean stocks that experienced volatility, as the Korean won weakened to 1,442 won per dollar, its weakest level since October 2022. And while the currency recovered to the 1,410 range against the dollar after the martial law was lifted, it remains relatively weak as it stayed in that range when it opened at 1,418 on Wednesday. In response, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, during emergency meetings held with top economic officials late Tuesday night and on Wednesday morning, vowed to supply unlimited liquidity to stabilize financial and foreign exchange markets. The officials also pledged to carry out pan-governmental efforts to monitor the finance market in real time. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
On top of volatility in domestic and global stock markets, the martial law declaration also fired shockwaves across the country and beyond. Our Yoon has this report.
The U.S. government expressed relief over the lifting of a martial law order in South Korea. On Tuesday local time, a White House National Security Council spokesperson said they were relieved President Yoon Suk Yeol had removed the measure and respected the South Korean National Assembly's vote to lift it. The spokesperson also highlighted that democracy is the foundation of the South Korea-U.S. alliance, adding the U.S. would continue to monitor the situation closely. However, Yoon's initial decision seemed to surprise Washington, with the Biden administration stating hours after the South Korean president had declared an emergency martial law order that it had not been notified in advance. In response to the martial law order, the New York Times expressed concern, highlighting South Korea's status as one of the U.S.'s most important allies in Asia, where tens of thousands of American troops are stationed. CNN said Yoon's decision to declare martial law is one of the most dramatic political decisions made by a South Korean leader in its modern democratic history, and plunges a major East Asia economy and a key regional U.S. ally into uncharted waters. CNN added that South Korea has been a vibrant democracy since the late 1980s, with guaranteed freedoms for its citizens and political figures. Despite the long history of the country's fractious and highly partisan politics, no leader in the democratic era has gone as far as declaring martial law. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
Let us now head over to the U.S., where the Biden administration reportedly expressed relief that President Yoon reversed the order. We have Voice of America correspondent Jessica Stone standing by. Hello there, Jessica.
Hey, good morning to you.
Good evening to you. Jessica, let's start with how the White House is reacting to the news at the moment.
Well, the latest statement we have actually comes from the State Department and from Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State. And you mentioned, you referred to it a little bit right there, but he said, "We welcome President Yoon's statement that he would rescind the order declaring emergency martial law," going on to say, "We continue to expect political disagreements to be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law. And we reaffirm our support for the people of Korea and the U.S.-ROK alliance based on shared principles of democracy and the rule of law." We just got that statement about an hour and a half ago. So the most recent sentiment from the U.S. government on the matter.
Well, it looks like the declaration was just as surprising to the U.S. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it did come as a surprise. There was no advanced warning for the U.S. government, and they said that repeatedly, whether it was at the Pentagon briefing or the State Department briefing. It's not clear that they should have expected to have some kind of advance notice, but they certainly reiterated that they did not. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kirk Campbell was actually in the middle of an event with the Japanese ambassador to the United States at the State Department when he was being peppered with questions. It was a totally unrelated event previewing a gala event, and he was asked about the developments, saying that these are things that he is treating with grave concern. He expressed every hope and expectation that any political disputes will be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law, and also went on to just say, everybody is trying to talk to their counterparts. So you get the sense that there was sort of a scramble here in Washington to find out what was going on, why it was happening, and why there was no advance notice, what it means, of course, to the alliance, whether it was going to affect U.S. troops, for example, or certainly the plans that have been laid out with the trilateral with the Japanese as well in terms of countering Beijing.
Right, shocking to a lot of us. Now, Pentagon says that there's no change in the defense posture in terms of U.S. troops stationed here in South Korea. Now, we should think of it as a relief, shouldn't we?
It certainly would be a relief to many of the soldiers and their families, and certainly to some in Washington. But also, we don't have the final word on all of that. What we do know is that there's no curfew that's been issued on these troops, according to Pat Ryder, the spokesperson for the Pentagon. And he also said that there has been contact between the militaries, and that statement was made a few hours ago. So you can imagine that there might have been more contact in the intervening hours since that time. He also said that there's no indication that North Korea is trying to take advantage of the situation, which appears to be consistent with the reporting that you all have at Arirang as well. And so that is certainly something to be aware of and encouraged by, perhaps.
Yeah, and relief coming from the Biden administration. Now, I'd like to ask you, any word or comments from the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump?
Not at this point.
Okay.
And of course, he has many members of his former administration who may be coming back into the administration, who participated in those talks that we all followed so closely with Kim Jong-un, first in Singapore and then Hanoi, Vietnam. I actually was on the ground there doing those reports, and definitely a fascinating time in foreign policy and a very challenging time in diplomacy. But he has not made any statements on social media. I haven't been able to find any statements from his close circle around him. We do know that President Yoon was really preparing to make the case to President Trump that he should not carry out some of the expenditure agendas that he has been making statements about, asking South Korea to pay more for the troops on the DMZ. He was actually said to be working on his golf game, President Yoon was, in advance of that. So we know that the two of them may get a chance to talk, but of course the political situation on the ground there in Seoul is too fraught to predict exactly what will happen in the coming hours.
Alrighty, Jessica, thanks much for connecting with us as always, and also for the thorough report.
You bet. You bet.
It's another cold start to the day with sub-zero temperatures for many parts of Korea. Seoul is as cold as Tuesday, but Cheonan and Paju seem to be among the coldest spots, with lows dropping down to below -6 degrees Celsius. Afternoon highs will go down a couple of degrees today before a slight warm-up tomorrow with light wintry precipitation. Then it will get cold again on Friday. Make sure to cover up. Afternoon highs to be similar to slightly lower with a high of 4 degrees Celsius in Seoul under plenty of sunshine. Daegu sees a high of 9 degrees. Southern provinces will be under partly cloudy skies today. Now the capital area staying below norms through early next week. Meanwhile, Jeju and Jeollado provinces need to brace for a mix of rain and snow from Friday into Sunday. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for this morning. We will be back with another special coverage on the martial law declaration at 12 p.m. Korea time. And thanks for watching, and until then, goodbye.